So shall we move on to the Avalon deep dive?
Yes,
gentlemen. I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to pass over this microphone to Paul, the king of Avalon, and you guys can explain to me why this game isn't better than Secret Hitler.
And that's the way he hands it off. All right, guys, here we go. So it's a social deduction game. Let's start with that. Most of you, if you're listening to this podcast, have played social deduction games. You have played Werewolf or Mafia. You have played Secret Hitler. You have played Coup. You have played The Resistance, of which Avalon is a subset. We want to up your gaming. We want to take you from a game that is good to a game that is great whenever we possibly can. And we believe very strongly that the best of the social deduction games is The Resistance Avalon.
I will just say briefly, one of the wonderful things about this is the most affordable game we will ever discuss. On Amazon right now, you can buy a copy of The Resistance Avalon for $15. And imagine the value we've gotten out of that $15 from our copies.
It's amazing.
Hundreds of hours.
It's amazing.
So I will just say, it's one of the wonderful things about social deduction games is that they're wildly cheap. You just need enough people.
And let's also point this out. There is a type of gamer that we do not have in our game group. We do not have a party gamer in our game group. And yet, around the nation, around the world, there are game nights, weekend game nights that go on every single weekend of couples that get together for game night. And what do they play? They play party games. And when there are enough of them, they will play games like Werewolf. They will play games like Secret Hitler. This is a way to up that group of almost super casual gamers. Yeah.
They're great for family get-togethers. For Christmas is when a lot of these games, or even bachelor parties, or things like that, where you have a lot of people together and not everybody's a gamer. These kind of games are great for that.
Exactly.
Yeah, can you make a transition from the Cards Against Humanity groups into Avalon? Like, is that a bridge too far? It's probably a journey worth taking, though.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the thing. There's why do we game, right? There's different reasons that we game. Most Euro games, it's to figure out a puzzle. It's to turn your brain on to maximum and see if you can outthink and out-strategize and out-plan. These games are very different. Half of the people in these games, they are trying to be detectives and try to figure out who is telling the truth and who is lying. The other half of the people in this game are trying to secretly get away with their agenda, right? Some of them are playing spies. Some of them are playing detectives. And there is a very, very universal drive in that I think is really positive.
It comes down to trust. Like, as a whole, humans really have this complex relationship with trust. Like, we are born needing to trust, and in the end, nothing hurts us more than betrayal. And this game really,
which is what appeals to you,
which is what appeals to me exactly, Trey. And I think this these social deduction games really deal with that, and I think it really rewards.
Yeah, social is the key word. Like, we play board games for lots of different reasons, and I think of the games that we know, the one that emphasizes social.
Absolutely.
The most.
Absolutely.
That's Avalon. So whereas I might not be completely comfortable saying Avalon is the best, that's certainly my opinion, but that's certainly the best for our group. And so we're evangelical about Avalon. Game Brain, if you're listening to this right now, you've gotten this far on this journey and you've not played Resistance Avalon, we absolutely 100% recommend you go out and buy it, learn how to play it, maybe circle back to this podcast later on. I mean, listen to it now. Definitely listen to it now, but then circle back to it later on after you have 3 or 4 plays under your belt. That'd be great.
Trey, how many times has our group played this game, do you think?
I'm hesitant. I think you put it at over 300. I
believe that's correct.
I think that's very safe. I can't think of another game where we've had to replace the copy of the game multiple times.
Huge waste of time.
On the contrary, this is the best way to spend time with your friends.
And the value, oh my God, 300 games, $15. Come on.
I'm kidding. I think if I think back at our game group and our game nights, I'd be hard pressed to think of more memorable gaming moments than we've had in Avalon.
Well, let's talk about our manager. A guy that literally brought you and I together, who had game nights. His head he does not like a lot of the games that we play, so he doesn't come here often. What is his absolute favorite game?
It's Avalon, for
By
sure.
far.
Yeah. Until he saw how we played it, and then he had the exact same initial reaction as mine. Is like, oh, you guys have sucked all the fun out of this and broken it down into math, basically.
Absolutely not.
Completely inaccurate statement.
But just one more thing. One of the things that I think for me personally that I really love about Avalon is it really doesn't matter if I win or lose.
Right.
I think what you're really building is the social interaction. And I think just watching that transpire over the course of 5 missions is amazing, especially if you have the framework to get there.
Okay, so let's go over really quickly, super basic, what this game is. Avalon plays 6 to 10 players. Each player gets a card that tells them their role. Some people are good guys, some people are bad guys. The good guys want to succeed in these 5 missions. The bad guys want to fail as many of these missions as they can without getting found out. Whoever succeeds 3 times is going to win it. How do we play the game? We think that the game plays best with 7 to 10 players. We're not crazy about 6. I think 6 is perfectly fine.
Yeah, I would have said 7 to 9. I think even after our 10-player game, that seemed like too many.
It's tough
on Friday.
I kind of agree with that.
7 to 9 is still a pretty good range, especially because there's so few games that play that.
Got it. Most people, I agree. Most people in the game are going to be normal knights of the round table. They don't know anything special. They just want to succeed in these quests. The most of the bad guys are traditional bad guys. They don't know anything except they know who the other bad guys are, and they're working to fail these missions. As far as the special cards that we play, the people that get the special roles, here are the ones that we recommend playing with. Merlin, you have to play with Merlin. Merlin's special ability is he gets to know who the bad guys are. At the beginning of the game, everybody's going to close their eyes, and somebody is going to, matter of fact, later in this episode, I am going to call out something that you guys can use in your games to sort of start the game correctly. So Merlin knows who the bad guys are, which is crucial. Now, you would say, why can't Merlin then just tell everybody who the bad guys are? Because in Avalon, the great rule is that at the end of the game, if the good guys win, the bad guys have a second bite of the apple. The bad guys can figure out who Merlin is. They get 1 vote, 1 chance to say who Merlin is, and if they guess correctly, they kill Merlin, and they win the game. They snatch victory away.
That is my favorite part of the game. And I think the rule that elevates this game into masterpiece territory is just that simple fact that the bad guys always can win, no matter what happens in the game.
Yep.
If they just pick Merlin correctly. And they always have a 1 out of 10, 1 out of 9, 1 out of 8, 1 out of 7 chance. They could just get lucky. But that tension is so fun. Of in our group we go heads down when the game's over and all the bad guys start talking, so everybody puts their heads down so that they don't give away information, like poker face kind of stuff. And then the bad guys get 1 shot at it, 1 shot at the king, and if they take him down, they win, which is awesome.
You best not miss.
Yeah, if you shoot at the king, you best not miss. So Merlin needs help, which is why we always play with the role Percival. Percival gets 1 special ability, which is he gets to know who Merlin is. Basically, everyone with their eyes closed, Merlin and only Merlin will put his thumb up, and Percival gets to open his eyes and see who Merlin is. So there's 1 guy who knows a lot of information, but he can't say too much, and there's 1 guy who knows. And if the 2 of them can communicate in some small way without anybody noticing, which is the key, they can have a real advantage.
It took me a minute to understand the role of Percival when we first started playing with it, but I think simply it's just you're supposed to look like Merlin.
Yeah, we'll deep dive on that a little bit later. Right now, we're just going over the basics of the roles. The only other special role that we include in the game is Mordred. Mordred is one of the bad guys, and he's the bad guy that Merlin can't see. So if there are 3 bad guys in the game, Merlin only knows 2 out of the 3. Why is that amazing? That's amazing because Merlin doesn't know who's safe and who's not. If Merlin tries to hint to somebody that, hey, I'm Merlin, he could be talking to Mordred, and he could have ended the game right there for the good guys.
Now, I just want to emphasize, this is just, these are the special roles that we've chosen for our group, for our particular skill level. There are other roles that can really basically make it easier for the good guys, make it harder for the bad guys. There are roles like Morgana, for example, who winds up looking like Merlin to Percival. And so that usually makes it a little bit harder for the good guys. If your bad guys are doing too well in your group, you could put in Oberon.
Yeah, I'm going to just go ahead and cut you off. Our recommendation is don't play with these roles.
Absolutely.
Let's not waste time on them. Our recommendation is these are people who say, "Hey, this is some variety. Let's mix it up." Like, don't actually.
I agree with that absolutely, Trey.
Sorry for interrupting you, Paul.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You know, I understand.
I will just say also, in this copy I'm looking at right now, these cards are pristine. They have never been touched.
This is my problem. When I buy
Morgana.
games, they don't get played because I always play at yours or Tom's house. So,
but in our meta, like what we find is actually the bad guys win more often than the good guys because
Slightly,
and part of it, the reason is because of our roles that we choose. But
Correct.
We found that this is the most fun.
Yes,
That's the real reason why we picked this.
We're not really looking for a perfect 50-50 split. What we're looking for...
That's not the goal, yeah.
Yeah. What we're looking for is what is the most interesting game if you are a normal good guy? What is the most interesting game if you are a normal bad guy? And we feel that this is the perfect mix.
Absolutely.
So let's get into strategy. First things first, when we play with somebody that has never played this game before, they all seem to make the same mistake, which is you ask them, "Hey, are you a good guy?" And they're like, "Well, why are you asking?" Like, or "Let's find out," or all that sort of stuff. This game is not about obfuscation. This game is entirely about building trust. Beginners, they play the game cagey, and that is absolutely wrong. What you want to be doing constantly, whether you're a good guy or a bad guy, is building and engendering trust. Pointing out, hey, look, I didn't vote for that team that failed the mission badly. I voted yes. I've been yelling from the top of my lungs for 10 minutes about why we should have done this instead of that. You're trying to get people to see the events that are happening on the board, the events that are happening in front of you, your way. You're trying to, if you're a bad guy, you're trying to gaslight the entire table. If you're a good guy, you're trying to convince people that you figured something out.
Yeah, and to that extent, basically, Avalon, there's a huge component of table image. You want to portray yourself as a certain style. Basically, for me, what I've done is I've created a table image where I'm actually the opposite of what Tom has described. I am the cagey one. I am the person who you don't always know if I'm good or bad. If you're a good guy and you go, "Oh, I have to put Paul on the team," you're like, If you're a bad guy, If you ever have to choose me to be on your team, it's something that I've cultivated, and the reason why I've done that is because I want to play the game over and over again. And so consistently over the rounds, over the hundreds of times that we've played it, what we get to do is I get to be cagey whether I'm a good guy or a bad guy. So I give less information. And I think that's also very consistent with what everyone else in our game group does.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think what you're doing is the kind of thing that somebody who's played over 200 times can do. I think if you're a new player, I would start with Tom, and then
I agree with that.
As you know, like a more advanced poker player, once you've mastered basic strategy, then you're ready to kind of mix it up. And I think you're at the stage where you can mix it up, and it's almost like too difficult a note for somebody who's still under 50 plays.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I'm at the point now where I try out different personalities in the game. Where okay, I'm going to be talky, jovial, jokey guy this time. I'm going to just sort of sit back and see how things go this time. And I feel like I've gotten to the point now where I'm not giving away too much, regardless of which personality overlay I put on myself.
Absolutely.
To some degree.
Absolutely. But there is one other thing that associated with this is that you have to know who you're playing with. For example, if you're playing with a new player, they're going to act cagey just from inexperience sometimes,
right?
And that's
right. A lot of what Tom's talking about here, his kind of like number one insight is that a lot of the instincts players have coming into the game are in fact wrong, and so this kind of segues to our number 2 point. Our number 2 big point here is that Avalon has a lot in common with poker. You've already used the term table image.
Absolutely.
I think table image is really important in this game. Another thing that's really important is table position. Where are you in the table in relation to who's picking the team? Knowing who has the power position to pick the team every round. And then again, like you're mentioning kind of like a poker aspect here of like when you're looking at another player on the table, you really have to be considering what is this player's level of experience. They're doing a lot of things right now that make me think that they're a spy, or they might just be new. And new players do that kind of thing that Tom's talking about, where they don't build trust, and you're like, okay, is this just new guy bullshit? Or first bleep.
So you always have to keep that in consideration.
Yeah, and you talk to them like they're little deer. Like, it's okay, it's all right. No, I think you made some very good points there. Here, let me talk about blah blah blah.
So maybe like the same way in poker that you have a table image in which you don't want to be giving away what your role is by what your external personality is. If you're only quiet when you're a bad guy, that's a problem.
Yep.
And so your starting point, again, if we're kind of like looking at this of like where your starting point in the game should be before you start to mix it up, is you actually, I would say as a starting point, try to be consistent from game to game in terms of what are you presenting outwardly when you play. You cannot allow yourself to be quiet when you're playing Merlin, which is a real temptation, or a bad guy. These can be big tells. So
So what should everybody be pretending to be?
All right, so this is strategy insight number 3. I would say kind of a core insight of the game is that everyone should be playing the game as if they have a basic blue identity card in front of them. We have all these different roles. We have Merlin, we have Percival, we have bad guys, but outwardly you should be representing that you are just a basic blue person, and your behavior
and blue,
should
blue
reflect,
means a good guy.
Blue,
good knight.
Yes, blue means a good guy. So anything that you do that counters this narrative is giving away information that can lose the game. It also can kind of help you when you're a bad guy and you're thinking, okay, what do I need to be representing here? What would a basic blue person be doing? Because if you're Merlin, you don't want to look like Merlin.
Yeah. And basic blue people all the time will do things that make them seem less basic blue. And if I'm one of the bad guys in the game, I'm going to be harping on that. I'm going to be saying, why did you say that? Why did you do that?
And as a side note, like, I think most beginners feel like when they get a basic blue person, they're not going to have them an interesting game. They're going to, I'm just basic blue. Mm-hmm. But actually, what we found in our game is that basic blue is the most nuanced character to play.
Most challenging.
It's actually like you want to get basic blue in some ways because it makes you better at the game.
Well, you're a detective. You have no information at the beginning, and by the end of the game, you can go on this amazing journey where you go through theory A to theory B to theory C, and at the end of the game, you catch the bad guys. There is no better experience than a successful basic blue play.
At the same time, like, towards the end of the game, you actually can't. You have to sort of pretend that you're Merlin a little bit. You have to provide cover for Merlin
if you can.
If you can, definitely. But what you can't do is make it clear that you are basic blue.
So Trey, what are the things that you should do if you want to play like you're basic blue? If you want to play like you are a clueless knight who is just trying to figure this out, what are some tips?
Okay, so the core thing you are doing as a basic blue player is you are searching for the bad guys. Like, this is your core MO. So, and that's legit. Like, that's, you're always looking, you're always trying to kind of call out inconsistencies. Now, what you call out as inconsistencies and what you think are inconsistencies, those are not the same thing. And I'm curious what you guys think. I think one of the things I do when playing the game now is I'm kind of keeping a running tally in my mind of things that people have done. And if any of them signal that a player is special, I just classify that as special. Mm-hmm. You kind of file that away and you don't necessarily want to say it, right? Because if you're a basic blue guy and I'm seeing some behavior from someone that is, I would consider like weird or special, I might, if I call it out, I might be outing Merlin. That's the danger if I'm seeing something weird. So you have to kind of keep track of, okay, that seems kind of spy-y, but it could be Merlin-y too. But I think dividing in your brain players who you think might be specials versus those that I can categorize as basic blue is helpful.
Yeah, I think, listen, at the end of the game, it's a deduction game, and there are only 4 things we can use to deduce the proper information as to who everybody is. First is behavior, right? We get to look at your behavior. We get to see, do you have a tell? Are you acting differently than you normally act, which is exactly what Trey's talking about now. 2 is how do you vote? When you're putting together a mission, how did you vote? the more information. We'll get to that a little bit later, but that's a second thing. How you have voted and your voting history can tell you a lot about what a player's allegiances are. 3 is, were you on missions that succeeded or failed? And then 4 is the Lady of the Lake. The Lady of the Lake gives a tremendous amount of information as well. We'll get to all of these, but really there is nothing beyond those 4 things in order for you to successfully determine good from bad, and that's really key.
So I think the next thing that kind of springs out of this kind of basic blue mindset or basic strategy for playing the game is, at the core of basic blue is that a basic blue player is not certain of anything, and so this would be strategy insight number 4 is like embrace uncertainty, and I mean that in a couple of different ways. One, it is okay to play hunches in this game, but you need to be able to abandon them real quick,
instantaneously, in light of new information.
Right.
I do tend to start off with, okay, look, this is the poker player in me, but I'm not really crazy about the way Matt is acting right now. There's something a little weird about that. Paul, I have no read on Paul yet, so I'm going to leave him out of the equation, and I'll just sort of go around and give my own little heat map of what's going on. Now, if I'm a bad guy, I'm doing that with a plan in mind. I'm doing that with I want to throw the tiniest bit of aspersion this way so that I can build on that later. If I'm a good guy, sometimes I'm saying that to try and get a reaction, to try and elicit a reaction from somebody, and to get a sense of, is this person reacting very, very strongly against the suggestion that they're bad? Generally, I find that the bad guys tend to have sometimes stronger reactions than your basic blues do to any suspicion on them.
Right, Dimitri, right. So yeah, again, going back to the thing about basic blue is you don't know who anybody is. You are in a mental state of uncertainty, and that's fine. I would say in this game, actually be very suspicious of people that are certain of anything. Again, certainty is an indication of specialness.
Of knowledge. Right. Of knowledge.
And so a lot of times I think, and maybe this is kind of like a new player problem, again, is that people are going to play their hunches and they're going to act real certain about them. And yes. This is actually a problem. If you're basic blue, it is completely okay to say, I don't know. Why did you pick that team? Right now I have no information. This is just my first general read. I'm not vouching for the people I'm putting on my team because I don't know. Like, you can say I don't know a lot, and it's fine. And I would say be suspicious of people that seem real certain of things.
And the corollary to that is do not overplay information that you get. There will be times in the game where we will see that a mission has failed, and we will say, well, there were 3 people on that mission. Clearly, one of them was a bad guy. And the reality is no, that is not clear. There could have been 2 bad guys on that mission. There could have been all 3 of those guys could have been bad guys if you're playing with 3 bad guys on the team. Odds are there's only one bad guy, but there's a big difference between saying there's one bad guy on the team and there was probably one bad guy on the team. And the more and more we play it, the more we play with those edge cases where we start purposely putting 2 bad guys on the team, which creates its own communication issue, but can have great benefits because everybody assumes that this is, it's the old Sherlock Holmes thing. Assumptions are the death of deduction.
Definitely. We're playing against our own meta.
Correct.
Paul, you're really good a lot of times when we're playing this game of pointing out the kind of logical inconsistencies, because people, and I can be guilty of this, of where we can look at a circumstance and say, it is just really highly unlikely that this is the case, that there were 2 bad guys on this team. The problem is that's not 0.
That is not 0.
And bad, and the other players will use that information against you.
Yes, I will use that against you.
But listen, which is absolutely true. I try to put a number. I try to say, look, I think that based on the information we have, there is a 80% chance, 90% chance that there was just one bad guy on that team, and try and assess it that way. It's a good thing for people to get their head around. And listen, whether you agree with it or not, you can argue about it. It gives some sort of shape to the probability that we're trying to craft here.
Now, that said, do identify when something is logically 100% true.
Absolutely. That's a key thing. If you know something is factual, this person, like A or B has to be a bad guy. When it's binary, definitely harp on that.
Lady of the Lake.
Yeah.
The Lady of the Lake is a mechanism in Avalon, which means after the second mission is done, whether it succeeds or whether it fails, one character will have the Lady of the Lake card, and they will hand that card to one other player. That person will then pass them one of two cards, a card that says, I am a good guy or I am a bad guy. And they cannot lie about that. When a Lady of the Lake gets these cards, looks at them, and says, I have the Lady of the Lake, I looked at Paul's card, Paul is a bad guy. That immediately becomes a 50-50 proposition. Well, not really. No, it's not even a 50-50.
No, the 100% thing we know at that point is that at least one of them is a spy.
Correct.
That is the 100% thing we know.
Absolutely.
It could
there's no time where two good people will call the other one out.
And by the way, we use spy and bad guy interchangeably.
Yeah.
So it could be that I'm a spy and I'm lying about Paul, trying to throw him under the bus.
Which often is done.
Frequently. It could be that I'm a good guy and I've successfully found a spy in Paul. Or it could be that both Paul and I are spies and we're playing some advanced game. One thing it can't be is that I am a good guy and Paul is a good guy and I have said that he's a spy, because a good guy can't do that.
It's not possible. All right, so kind of circling back around, so you will be a better player by holding your own hunches in very low regard. And that's kind of the uncertainty thing again. If you think you can detect a lie, I think studies have shown you're wrong. For one thing, like even cops have high certainty that they can detect a lie. They go and test it. It's not true. Nobody has some magical lie detection. It should only be a starting point.
I'm really good at it. I just want you to know.
I am as well.
Yeah.
So I think
Paul and I are the exception to the rule, though. We want to make sure you understand. Almost everybody except for Paul and Tom,
right,
are really, really. They think they're better at lie detection than they are.
I'm guessing you're both lying right now,
and you'd be wrong.
The thing you should put a lot more weight on, though, are logical inconsistencies. That's not the same thing as like I've got a vibe that somebody is lying. When somebody actually is arguing something and it doesn't make sense and it breaks down and they have trouble actually justifying it when you press it on them, that is a much more reliable tell. And there's a reason for this, which is that if you're a good guy, you're a good guy. That's an easy story to remember, and you're representing it the entire time, and you're searching and you don't know things, but your story is pretty straightforward as far as what you're doing. When you're a bad guy, you're actually constructing a fiction in which you are a good guy, and you're starting to take all the information that's happened in the game and structure this narrative that other players, blue players, would believe that will include you as a good player. That's rather complex.
Yes.
And it's easy for that to, not easy, but it can break down. And when you can determine that this is broken down and that someone's struggling to kind of make their narrative make sense, that is often a very good indication that somebody is bad.
PET scans of the brain. They can tell when a person is lying if they're in a positronic emission scanner, because they notice that the brain is more active when a person is lying. Their brain needs to do more work to perpetuate and create a lie than it does to tell a truth. And you can, to some degree, detect that when a person has said a logical inconsistency.
All right, the final... Oh, Paul, did you want to say something?
Nope.
The final kind of like big core insight I identified in the game, and I'm not even sure, like you guys might disagree with me on this. I would say that, bad guy strategy or Minions and Mordred strategy really should be focused about finding Merlin. It's nice when you can win the game on missions, but the more you play, you realize that bad guy's really about finding Merlin.
I totally agree with that. I think like in the end, there are always more blue players, more good players than bad guys. And chances are the good guys are going to rally at some point and figure out who the bad guys are, especially when the Lady of the Lake is in play. So as a bad guy, at least the way I play, I'm trying to incite Merlin to give up more information than he should. I'm trying to find a way to manipulate the conversation or the voting or whatever in order to
You're trying to force Merlin to intervene
exactly.
to succeed on the mission level and out themselves.
Absolutely. That's exactly
Which is exactly what happened, frankly, in our last game on Friday, right?
That is absolutely what happened. Like
in the very first vote, in fact, there were only 2 people who voted no on the first mission, which had bad guys on it. And those 2 people were Merlin and Percival.
Oh, no. I think what TREY is referring to is when David Gilson says, I have information, these people are bad. And basically saying, I'm either Percival or Merlin.
Correct.
Good players have to actually kind of risk outing Merlin sometimes in order to succeed on the mission level.
Absolutely.
Which is, again, what happened on Friday night. I was basic blue. I was completely clueless. I had to do what you don't want to do as basic blue, which is essentially like reveal your cluelessness to everyone, because there was a real danger that we were going to lose the game on missions. And I was actively looking for information.
Which is a little bit of a corollary to what we were saying about basic blue strategy, which is you do want to have an open mind. You do want to be able to play like you're a clueless person. But when you start to gain information, when you start to feel like you have a little bit of footing with what's going on, you want to ramp up to being more and more convinced and more sure in what you're saying. Because what you're doing is you're providing cover for Merlin.
If you can.
If you can, the best thing you can do as a basic good guy who doesn't know anything is to appear to be one of these guys that is somebody who was Merlin and was hiding in the first part of the game and then comes out when he feels like he has to later in the game and seems to know what's going on. If you do that, then the bad guys are going to have to include you in their Merlin calculation. The more people are included in that Merlin calculation, the harder it is for them to win.
I think as a bad guy, you kind of know that you've played a good game when you can pretty much deduce Merlin to a coin toss. When you identify, this is Merlin, this is either Merlin or Percival, and these 2 people. And if you've done that, you've done your job. Like, it's really hard to really figure out who Percival and Merlin are 100% of the time. It's impossible, actually. But
unless Merlin and Percival have not communicated well, in which case, boom, you're off to the races.
And that should be your goal. I mean, I think the premium goal, though, is for you to get, as the bad guy, is to get Merlin in such a terrible position where TREY says, I am Merlin, please don't pick these guys. And then everyone looks at TREY and says, oh, you're a bad guy. that's what you're hoping for. But in jest, the coin flip is probably the best version.
Right. And I have such a healthy respect for this game that you really shouldn't feel bad about that coin flip. It really is a coin flip a lot of times. But that's also why we're pointing that the bad guys in our group probably win slightly more than blue. But that's because generally the bad guys, we've played enough where you can get it down to a coin flip.
Exactly.
And in the criticism of my game, even though blue team did win on Friday night, was that
thanks to you, by the way, just wonderful play.
No, it was not a great game by me. We did end up winning, but I did the thing I don't want to do as basic blue, which is that I eliminated myself from the discussion of potential Merlins.
Yeah.
You guys did get it down to a coin flip. You lost the coin flip. Yep. But that's why we would if you can get it to a coin flip, you're going to win more games than you lose.
And just a comment of our last game, the epic game, it was a comedy of errors. Bad guys did a whole bunch of things that were oh, that was not the optimal move. And the blue team were going, I don't know what's happening. It was so fun to watch. And it made such great tension. So even when people aren't playing optimally, this game really shines.
Again,
at least.
Let's get to voting.
Yes.
So each round, we're going to have to pick a team of 2, 3, 4, or 5 players. Everybody gets to vote on whether or not the team goes, and you have 5 chances to do it. The 5th vote, everybody has to vote yes, otherwise the bad guys automatically win. Right? This is one of those. This is probably the biggest piece of information that you have for most of the game. Really figuring out who the bad guys are is going to be paying attention to and tracking. For us, after every single vote, we say, stop, wait, don't pull your things back yet. Who voted no on that? Who voted yes on that? It becomes crucial because you can piece it together. You're like, wait, why did you vote yes on this team, but you voted no on that team? What is your reasoning for that? And most of the time, that is where one of the bad guys will become unmasked.
Yeah, and you're saying you're not really even tracking yeses and nos. You're really just tracking yeses. And because yeses are the far more interesting.
So here's the other thing. So new guys, new players to the game tend to vote yes too much. We think that, and by the way, I disagree with the meta of our game a little bit. I think we are too no heavy. So here's the paradox. The paradox is that ideally, good guys want to see a lot of votes. They don't want the first team chosen to go, because then we're not getting any information. What we want to do is we want to see a series of 3 or 4 votes each time in order to be able to get a body of information, in order to get a database together that shows, okay, that was a little weird, that was a little weird, that was a little weird. If it happens in just one vote, you've gotten almost no information.
This feels like a good point for me to chime in, because this to me is the section of the game that I find the least interesting and the part where I check out. So in the first few rounds of Avalon, our meta is to vote yes is to play incorrectly. I know you just said you think we are a little too no heavy, but to me it feels the first few votes, it's just always, and I'd say 90% of the time this is true, it comes down to whoever is last in turn position, so wherein one of those last 2 people has to have their group go, or else the bad guys automatically win, which to me feels like everybody between them is basically just, is somebody going to make a mistake, is the only information that is available there. And that to me feels, A, not fair to new players, because they're gonna. And then what's the point? Then we're just sort of singling out new players and waiting for them to tip more information than they should. And if there are no new players, there's literally no information to glean, because everybody's going to vote no. And then it's just going to come down to, so why not just jump right to the last 2 people every time?
Well, so the truth of what you're saying is this, is that if everybody votes no unless they're on the team, you get no information.
Correct.
You get literally no information. So that defeats its own purpose. If, however, we say that our predilection should be no, but increasingly, so in the very first vote, if you're not on the team and you want to vote yes, have a good reason for it. Because you're going to be questioned about it and be able to defend it. Right? I have a really strong impulse with that person too. But I would say that...
But that's just a hunch then, which is a mistake.
Not necessarily. I'm just saying that for the first team that's proposed, I would say my threshold for voting yes on a team I'm not on is 10% of the time I'll do it. The second vote, it jumps up to 20%. Third vote, for me...
You mean third proposed group?
Third proposed group.
In the first round?
In the same round.
Okay.
In the exact same round. There has not been a team chosen yet.
Yeah.
By the third vote, me personally, I think we play incorrectly. I think that we should, between the third and the fourth vote, we should pick our team. The reason is that the fifth vote, if the fifth team goes, we provide no information whatsoever, because everybody
it's
has
just going to be
vote
whoever
yes.
that person is.
But the real information is on the fourth and the third vote, then, right? I mean, I think we're doing this. I think you've got a valid concern there.
I guess for me, it's just I have a bad habit of pulling out my phone during that first round or two and just checking out, because I don't feel there's any meaningful decisions.
Okay, but
I'm saying it's a bad habit.
That's kind of like saying, as a poker player, I'm not watching other players when I'm not in the hand. You know, like you should be watching and paying attention to the whole time. I'm sorry if you're checking out, but I always feel like I'm getting information, and maybe because I am a more experienced player, I don't need to be the one injecting chaos into this. Other people do it very routinely, so why do I need to do that?
So then what? Help me.
Paul is nodding, by the way.
Help me find something fun for me in that first round. What should I be looking for?
Okay, so first round, let's say flat out, we are grasping at straws. We have the only information we have before the first vote happens is behavior, which is notoriously unreliable, very difficult to determine, right? Only a few people know anything, and they are holding their cards super close to the vest, right?
And it seems that whoever the louder the person is there, the more guilty they look, the more spyish they look, the more they have hunches or certain of things, or, oh, Dimitri looked at me funny there, guys. That's not the way Dimitri plays.
Sometimes, but
there's a poker note. You can say to you in the back of your head, I'm seeing a performance. Why am I seeing a performance here?
Sure. I would say that my main style of play, I try to throw out ideas. I try to say my gut instinct, here's some gut instincts, just to put a little to put something in the pot besides just water.
No, that's a great point, because that's a really good thing to do, because in a sense, you're leading a discussion that Merlin can't have, right? Like you can sometimes get confirmations on stuff without, as a basic blue player or whatever, like Merlin can kind of confirm it without actually revealing themselves.
Correct. If Merlin says, I don't like Matt, and Matt is a bad guy, Matt is going to remember that for the rest of the game and probably pick Merlin and vote him out. If, however, I, as a basic blue player, as a total normal guy that doesn't know anything, says, I got a weird feeling about Matt, Merlin can totally say, yeah, you know what? I kind of, maybe a little bit too. I'm not really sure yet.
Or Merlin can speak with the votes, with his own vote. Right?
Correct.
His
correct.
Or her own vote.
You're giving him cover to vote no on something. You're giving him a situation like that.
Paul never says anything during the first round. Paul always I don't think I've ever seen you do anything, give any stimuli, give any I feel like for the whole first round, you just wait for people to make a mistake, which to me is correct play, but also boring play.
Thank you, Matt. I personally do not inject a lot of anything in the first round because there are people in our group who do. Like I'm actually doing what I think is best for me, which is to watch everyone. I'm watching everyone all the time in the first round.
Paul is holding the space for us.
I'm holding a space for everyone. But yes, I'm watching everyone.
But everyone should. I think you're playing correctly. So I think like all we're really doing is just taking advantage of like Dimitri and his inability to be quiet.
It's not true. What TREY and I just said is by me throwing things out there, by throwing some things that maybe are random. I mean, occasionally I will. I've played a lot of poker in my day. Occasionally I will get a little sense like there's something just a little bit off about the way he's acting right now. That maybe it means he has a 52% chance of being what I say he's doing as opposed to 48. It's still
file it away. Yeah,
still,
in our game from Friday, Nick was voting yes on missions he wasn't on. It was suspicious. Turns out he was bad. Correct. In the end, so that information had meaning.
Correct.
So throwing things, but he misplayed.
Maybe.
So the only reason you got information is because he played poorly.
I'm okay, but that doesn't mean that I should play poorly, right? That's my position.
But if everybody is at the same level, then it's a pretty boring first round.
But Matt, you said that the proper play is to shut up in the first round. I'm saying no, it's not. I'm saying the proper play, if you don't know what's going on, is to throw some things out there to give Merlin.
But if anybody responds to that, they are playing suboptimally.
No.
I think everyone's got to respond to that because we're building trust in this game. Staying silent and saying nothing is the opposite of building trust. I think that is the wrong play. Is to have somebody say there's something a little weird about the way you're acting, and for you to say nothing. I think that
let's get people on the record. You know, what did you notice? What do you think? You know, like get people talking. This is like you don't know what's going to be fruitful.
Exactly.
Early on.
Well, exactly. I'm building a database of information that is going to lead to the discovery of the traitors in our midst.
I think, Matt, to your point, you're saying if everyone plays, per our paradigm, it's almost robotic. It doesn't. The game doesn't start until the Lady of the Lake picks someone, basically. And I agree with you, actually. But no one in our group doesn't do that. In fact, I don't think we ever get to that steady state where everyone plays the same. I even am changing my paradigm a bit. I will go straight off, before the game starts. It goes, I'm going to play a little crazy today, everyone. And, and people have to adjust to that.
So I guess, and this is not something that just I brought up. I've noticed that almost any time we play for the first time with somebody, like when we introduce Jake to this game or things, that everybody has the same, well, nobody knows anything. So why are there rules in the first round? It's all chaos. Let's just try stuff. That I've noticed that of every time we introduce a new player, and I guess I never really get away from that feeling as well. So I guess for me, what I need to do is give myself permission to play how I want to play in the first round or two. Because to me, to just say no because if I don't, it's a mistake.
But you're not doing the thing that Tom said. You're not building trust,
right? By
doing that, and you're not getting information. Yeah. By doing that. So you're undermining your own kind of credibility. So I'm just saying, I'm going to leave that to others. So in case we didn't say it explicitly here, the kind of core idea about why we do this is, especially in the first round, why would I vote for a team that does not include me? Like
Right.
that's your starting point.
Right.
Okay.
And you shouldn't.
And you shouldn't.
Right.
Okay. But people do it all the time.
And frankly, we in our dynamic, I feel very strongly that we need to vote yes on more teams that do not have us.
But then you're admitting that it's only a hunch, and I think that's okay.
But yeah, on a sliding scale,
I'll say this:
the closer
it's
we
fun.
get to the closer we get to that vote 5, the more we need to be opening that up.
I mean, I think like to make it really simple, I think our group internalizes that we should only vote for teams that have us on it in the first round, but we can vary that. I think that's ultimately like if you're just doing random stuff, that's bad. If you internalize the fact that like, oh, there is a mathematically optimal play, I'm going to choose to not play that optimal play to create a more interesting play. I think that's a totally valid way to go.
And let's face it, in poker, it's no different. In poker, I am determining whether or not you have the cards or you are bluffing. And
yeah, but I have a lot more information to go on right off the bat in poker. I have the flop, I have my hand, I have probability, I have a lot of things that I can be basing on. I have your betting patterns. In the first round of Avalon, I have literally just shots in the dark.
Right. When you sit down at the poker table and you're just starting to play, I have no betting pattern.
Well, yeah, but it's not fun before you're dealt cards in poker either.
No. What I'm saying is that first couple hours of a poker tournament that I've been in many, many times, you are building up a database. And it is difficult. You're trying to figure out, okay, this is the way this guy acts when he has a hand. This is the way this guy acts when he doesn't have a hand. I'm starting to put together a little something.
I see what you're saying.
I'm seeing the way he's betting now is different than the way he was betting before, and I'm paying attention to that as well. Where the first round is the hard work of the game. You are doing a lot of work to get very little data, but that data is crucial because it's what you're building off of.
I guess to me the game becomes I find that I'm always awake and interested in the game after the first Lady of the Lake. That to me is when it becomes now we have action. Now there's arguments. Now there's factions. Now there's binary choices. One of them is bad. Things like that. That to me is when it gets now there's a game to play.
Well, our information has jumped exponentially. It is true.
So if you're a new player, just the takeaway from this is when in doubt, vote no. Mm-hmm. And there's a good reason for that, which is that, and maybe this is something to understand, is that you can always justify a no vote, especially if you're not on it. Even when you're on a team, you can justify a no vote. Something you sometimes see new players do is like, why'd you vote no on that? It's like, you can always justify no. No is actually a very good thing to do. Mm-hmm. So don't, if in doubt, vote no, especially early on. Now, the thing is that we were starting to talk about it, like once it gets around to like, this is the third team and this is a poker thing, is like, know who is in the hammer. Who is number 5, and then start working back from that.
TREY has the first choice to choose a team. I have the second. Paul has the third, Matt has the fourth, Dimitri has the fifth. Dimitri is in the power position. If Dimitri keeps voting no and these teams don't go, Dimitri will be able to pick a team that nobody can reject. Right? That is power. That is power in poker too. It's the difference between playing on the button or playing under the gun. And
so I want to know his team before I vote on Matt's team, or maybe even before I vote on Paul's team, because I think you're right. Like the first 2 rounds, it's going to be hard to get me to vote yes, but on that number 3, I'm now yes eligible. But hopefully I've gotten some information, and I get it often enough, Matt, just to say that like I still get enough information from doing this that I don't see any reason to change it, and especially just because other people aren't playing the way I am. So.
I want to keep the talk moving. So can we move into evil strategy?
Yes.
Okay. You're a bad guy. Here's what you're looking at.
Let's not call them evil. Let's just call them red.
Alt good.
Yeah, we don't want to discriminate against evil people, Matt.
To be clear, Matt is saying that there are good people on both sides. Here we go.
To be clear, I'm not saying that.
Bad guys like to work alone. It is true. If 2 bad guys end up on the same team, there becomes this little issue. Like, we haven't really had a chance to physically talk to each other. So who is going to vote this? Who's going to fail this mission? In each mission, the people that are on the team get 2 cards. They get a success grail and a fail grail. One fail grail fails almost any mission. There are occasionally a space that will require 2 fails to fail a mission, but for the vast majority of times, 1 fail fails a mission. The worst thing, absolute disaster for the bad guys, is there are 3 people on a team, 2 of them are bad guys, and they both fail the mission. The good guys have gotten a tremendous amount of information. They know for a fact 2 of those 3 guys are bad. That means they've almost won the game right there. I mean, you can almost give it up. They're going to get away with murder from this point out. So bad guys like to work alone because you want to avoid that situation. You want to avoid that situation of, is it going to be me or is it going to be the other guy? Now, we have a convention that we play in our group where if Mordred is one of those bad guys, Mordred does not fail the mission. It is up to the other guy to fail the mission. The idea being that it's Mordred's job to stay hidden and all that sort of stuff. That said, it wasn't too long ago that we realized that Paul thought the convention was the exact opposite.
Yes. That would be me.
Well, there's a broader point there about the evil player should be protecting Mordred, right?
Correct. The evil player should be protecting Mordred, but Paul. Mordred is the only one that Merlin doesn't know about. As long as Mordred stays hidden, right? I would rather, as a bad guy that Merlin knows, I would rather out myself and be basically knocked out of the game in order to protect Mordred from being discovered. Because once Mordred's discovered, Merlin's got a much better game to play. All of a sudden, he knows for sure exactly who the bad guys are, exactly who the good guys are. He can start to secretly signal the other good guys and let them know who they are. He's basically has a free hand now as long as nobody is watching what he's doing. There's a lot of ways to play a lot of games once you find that out. Another thing, buying loyalty. If I am a bad guy and I have Lady of the Lake, I have a pretty good chance that I'm going to give this Lady of the Lake to a good guy, and I am 90% likely to say that good guy is a good guy, right? Because everybody likes to be validated, and it is going to make that person trust me more. It is going to make other people trust me more. Invariably in our group, somebody will say, that doesn't prove anything. He could definitely be a bad guy, to which I'll say, absolutely, I'm not. But absolutely, that could be true. Buying loyalty is a huge, huge thing.
And I would expand it. It's not just a Lady of the Lake thing.
True.
I would say, okay, Matt, if I'm talking to you and you're blue, and like we're trying to figure things out.
Yep.
And we're in, a couple rounds, 3 rounds into the game, and things are starting to shake out. And I say to you, like, I think you're good. Yep. Like, the starting point of my team is, you're good, and now we got to figure out the third thing.
I get a dopamine rush from that right there.
That's right.
Like, oh, Trey likes me. That's a good feeling.
But it's also like I'm telling the truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm being truthful with you. I'm like back to Tom's first point about, building trust. Saying be a little suspicious of that, but you kind of need to do that as a good player too. Like I'm doing that as a good player, but it's also really good as a bad player. It's like, okay, we're not going to figure out this third person here, but I believe you.
Yeah.
And so like now we're a group.
Yeah.
And that can work a lot.
And we're taking advantage of our biological instincts of wanting to be a part of a tribe. And when somebody says you're bad and you're not, that actually, that's one of the rare cases in our gaming group where I will actually feel actual emotions of anger. And like, and I mean, the minute the game ends, it disappears. Like, it just fades into the ether. It's not a permanent feeling. Yeah. But in the moment, if like when Dimitri has these moments where, and we haven't gotten to the Dimitri episode yet, but you'll get to know him. But when he has these moments where he just says you're evil and he goes, Matt's bad. He did this. And you're not. And you now know he's bad. It brings up rage.
Or Dimitri is colossally incorrect.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes.
Sometimes he's also on your side and just totally blowing it for the whole team right now.
Like on the side note to Dimitri, #non-gamer, I'd like to say that like he is the person who beats me the most at this game.
Yep.
When he you can lose, you can win, but it feels, this game is great when you get beaten as well. And Dimitri is the one who consistently beats me because I just underestimate him. And he's quite good and cloaked.
Especially he'll catch the logical inconsistency of your argument.
I will say this as well. Dimitri's a good poker player. I've played poker with Dimitri. I think that's part of what makes him really good at this game. Dimitri is a solid poker player.
No, he's good. He's good. I invited Dimitri into the monthly tournament that I go into, and he still goes. Listen, Dimitri pointed out something very interesting one of these games about a year or two ago that really kind of changed our perspective on this, which was if you get too many no votes for a mission, for a group, that's sometimes a really good sign.
Mm-hmm.
If you get too many yes votes, it means most of the bad guys voted yes on that mission. And that was a revelation that Dimitri came to. We'd already been a couple hundred games into this, and we were like, oh, that makes total sense.
That's right. It really played out on Friday, right? Like we had a number of missions that are like just failing, and it's like those teams were probably good then, right? Like that's
absolutely. Another way of buying loyalty is who you put on the team. It's like, look, I know I know I'm good. I'm pretty sure you're good. I think this is the basis for the team. And if you're doing that with somebody that is later up in the voting order, you're essentially neuro-linguistically programming them to possibly pick you on their team going forward. So that's another way we can do that. Another evil strategy: Merlin hunting. You are looking for Merlin. You are paying very, very close attention to who voted no on missions with bad guys on it, because it is very, very hard for Merlin to vote yes on a team that has a known bad guy on it. Also, pay attention. Ignore Mordred. Right? If Mordred is on a mission, and it doesn't matter whether or not Merlin voted yes or no, because they don't know that yet. But the two bad guys, pay attention to who is voting which way.
There's going to come a point in the game where the kind of like the correct theory of the case is going to be voiced.
Yes.
And as a bad guy, you need to have your ears open for when that happens. And then you need to kind of forensically say what just happened there.
Correct.
Did they stumble into it?
Right.
Or, okay, Paul just correctly identified the bad guys. Right. And you need to kind of work back from that point and say, okay, is Paul Merlin, or did, I'm just saying, like,
no,
you need to pay attention to that moment.
In your head. Don't say it out loud.
No.
And the path there.
But pay attention that when the story is told correctly, that's often a really key point in the game.
Correct. As Merlin, what I love to do is I love to come up with an incorrect theory and shout it from the heavens that is 50% right. I am pretty sure at this point that Matt and TREY are the bad guys. Matt and TREY are the bad guys. Only one of them is a bad guy. I'm going to use that to later revise that, or to hopefully get somebody else to revise that and say, no, I don't think it is Matt and TREY. I think it's Matt and blank, and get it in that way.
And as you just pointed out, this can't be out loud. Like the one thing you can't do as a bad guy, because you'll out yourself as a bad guy, is ask any questions that look like you're trying to determine who.
Like you're Merlin hunting.
Yeah, and that's, as a good player, you can really call that out when you see somebody who's like, that's really not a question you should be asking. That's a really good indicator that somebody is bad.
Correct. Last two things about bad guy strategy. Ruling players out is pretty much the way you get down to who Merlin is. It's like, there's no way that in the third round, TREY voted yes for a team that had two spies on it. TREY don't know nothing. TREY doesn't know what the heck's going on. He is definitely not Merlin. That's a good thing to know. And then last thing, knowing when you are known, right? At a certain point, the jig is up. Everybody has kind of figured out that you are one of the spies. When you know that, pretty much your options are extremely limited. It's probably best to just stop talking. Just stop talking. And voting is a very difficult thing in that situation as well.
You can often take someone else down with you, though, in those situations. You can try to make another good guy look bad with you, or I mean, I've often found that once you're outed, sometimes you can take, there's some collateral damage that can be done.
Exactly. Of course, it becomes binary at that point, right? It's like, okay, so he's a known spy, and he's saying Matt's good. So which is it?
This is an iocane moment.
Right. It's like, clearly I can choose the poison in front of me. It becomes an iocane moment, exactly. What I think personally is that while we may not be great truth tellers, For some reason, when it becomes a binary thing, I think people seem to, at least me maybe, they seem to figure out which way I'm going, whether or not I'm telling the truth or telling the lie in that moment. So knowing when you're known is a really important thing, and maybe getting one step ahead. Like, I'm about to be outed. My time is limited. I think there are 2 people that are still on the fence about me. There are 3 people that are pretty sure that I'm the bad guy. I should take one for the team to protect Mordred. Is a pretty important thing.
This can also mean, like, know who you are as a red player. If you are not Mordred, then at least one player already knows you're a bad guy. And whether Merlin has communicated with Percival that you're also a bad guy, I often feel like I'm going to propose a team, or a team's going to include me, and I'm a bad guy. Really track who's pushing against that.
Yes.
Like you there are little tells of like, boy, I didn't get any traction on that. So it's pretty well known that I'm bad. How did that get communicated? That's all I mean. It's like, know that you are known, and so you can read more into what other people are doing.
Great. Cool. Let's talk about the individual roles just real quick. I'm sorry, Paul.
Oh, no, that's we're good. I was going to transition to that.
Oh, fantastic. Paul, you look at your card at the beginning of the game, you're Merlin. What do you do?
Well, turns out, like, of the 300 games that we've played, I've played Merlin maybe 10 times at most, but when I am Merlin, and when I've seen people play Merlin, the one thing you need to do is basically make sure that you don't seem like you have too much knowledge. Mm-hmm. That's the primary thing. You need to find Percival. So, and someone will talk about Percival. But once that happens, once you find people you can trust, you need to also convey your knowledge to these people as subtly as possible. That can include so much as kicking someone under the table. It can pointing to yourself.
That's against the rules.
That is it?
You are not allowed to do anything under the table.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, then, what I normally do in my 10 times...
You've only been at 10 times, so it hasn't affected our game.
You've only cheated 10 times.
You have to... You must...
I don't think I've won in those games.
Okay. Let's put it this way. We had a guy at the game once. We're not going to talk about who, because it's somebody we all know.
Oh, I texted people.
That texted people.
Yes. I was not above texting.
Yes. Really, like, just ridiculously wrong. And, like, we didn't figure it out until the end of the game. And, like, we're like, what? He did what? No.
Totally thought it was legal, though. I genuinely did not know that was not allowed.
No.
I will say this, though. Paul once did just stab me in the back so bad. I was Merlin, and I look at him and wink, and he goes, "Matt just winked at me, everyone." And we were both good. And I was just like, oh, I understand nothing about this game. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
some amazing highs and amazing lows in this game.
Not your finest moment.
The rule
Paul.
is, just to be clear, the rule is that you are allowed to secretly communicate with anybody as long as it is interceptable. As long as somebody can, as long as you're risking something in doing that, right? You can wink, you can stare, you can do whatever you want to do, but everybody has to be able to see it.
Back to Merlin, though, like the other part of Merlin, not knowing too much, but towards the end of the game, you can't be so quiet that people think it's you. You can't be playing, obviously, Merlin. So Merlin has this balancing act of trying to figure out how to play it so that they look like basic blue.
What would a normal person do right now? Do that.
That's right, exactly. Pretend I don't know. Eviscerate that.
Well, that's
knowledge.
the uncertainty thing, right?
Exactly. Like if they are completely quiet, I think at least in our group we go like, oh, this person is too quiet. And if you are Merlin, you are on the chopping block. At the same time, if you have too much knowledge by the end of the game, that's bad too. So Merlin's really balancing your knowledge.
Absolutely.
You do not get any points as Merlin, though, if you protected your identity and then you lose the game on missions.
That is the rub. That is the rub. You have to make sure that you give enough information, steer the conversation so that the other blues have some light, some compass to where the bad guys are.
Yeah. In desperation, there are two things you can do. Semi-desperation is I am going to signal to a person that is either Mordred or a basic blue guy, a basic good guy. I'm going to signal to them that I'm Merlin so that they start listening to me. And then the seriously...
That happened in our game on Friday.
Sure. And then the seriously last-ditch effort is, look, I can't tell you guys why I know this, but I know that you cannot vote for this team. Strangely enough, that happened in the game. And sometimes you get away with it because it looks like more of the kind of play that Percival would play.
A cover play.
Which let's get to Percival. Trey, tell us how to play perfect Percival.
Well, let's just start with rule number 1 of Percival is you absolutely 100% have to communicate to Merlin that you are Percival. So this is not anywhere in the rules, but it's the way every group should play, is that if you are Percival, you must communicate to Merlin that you are Percival.
Matt Patterson, if you are listening, did you hear that? Thank you.
So how do you do this, Paul?
Well, I often, when I'm Percival, will stare directly into Merlin's eyes for a split second to make sure that they see me, but not so long as other people see me.
Matter of fact, I think in Friday's game, we had a false start where we had to redo it, and you were Merlin, and you didn't get to play it, which was maddening to you. And I was Percival, and what was it? Was it like a half a second that I looked at you and you immediately knew?
That's right. It was so subtle. It was Tom... like half winked at me. I go, okay, I know what. Oh, we have to turn her in. Thanks, Trey. Thanks, or it wasn't Trey that time. Was it me? Like
I was the first.
It was
time
Trey.
I had
Trey. Trey's knuckle cracked when he put his thumb up.
Trey's knuckle. That was hilarious.
That's the saddest old age thing that's ever happened in gaming.
It's really,
multiple times too.
It's really, really bad. But it just means to say that Paul and I were crestfallen when we had to do it over because we're like, oh, we're golden. Nobody in the world could have possibly caught that. And yet we both felt like I would say I wasn't even 100% sure if he caught that. But then afterwards, when I found out that he did catch that, I was like, okay, we have successfully communicated that. Now that's only step 1. Step 2 is he still has to communicate to me who the bad guys are, right? Or that the ones that he knows about anyway.
Right. So in case we didn't make it clear, if you are Merlin, we've just finished the read.
Yep.
Everyone's looking around now. I'm expecting within the first 30 seconds for Percival to identify themselves to me. And how will I know this? At some point, somebody's going to be kind of looking at me like they want to have sex with me.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be long. But it's hard to actually fake this. It's hard to fake.
Are we talking about this or the sex?
No, it's a very particular kind of eye contact. You will know
holding eye contact a little longer than is comfortable.
You know it when you see it.
Yeah, but that's what you should be doing as Percival.
And frankly, as the bad guys, you should be looking for that to some degree. So
maybe not in the first 5 seconds, but somewhere within 30 seconds. Like if a minute has passed and I'm Merlin and Percival is not identified to me, we're in trouble.
Good. And then once you've done that, what do you do then?
Well, you tell me. I don't do a lot of signaling of bad guys as Merlin. Do you?
It depends. It depends on where I'm seated, where other people are seated, who's looking around. If I can do, you can't see this right now, but I am sort of scratching my neck and I'm pointing to the person directly to the left of me. If somebody on the left or right of me is one of the bad guys, I'll see if I can get away with that. But you have to be super, super careful.
So where you're seated around the table is very important here. If Merlin and Percival are sitting next to each other, it seems to be a lot harder.
Oh yeah, it can or much easier, but for the most part, it's really, really hard to communicate that.
So in our meta, if I'm Merlin,
yeah,
and you're Percival, and I kind of gesture just my thumb over to Matt like that, what am I indicating?
Bad guy,
right?
Bad guy, yeah, exactly.
So that may be something that's particular to our group. I'm not saying he's safe. I'm saying he's bad.
Yes, that's in our meta. I just want to know who the bad guys are. Now that said, a lot of times you can't do that. That becomes very risky because if the bad guys see it, boom, the game is over before it even began. So the other way you can do that is by listening to what Merlin is saying, by watching how Merlin is voting, and pretty much in 1 or 2 rounds, you will know
that's enough. The fact that you know that somebody is Merlin gives you the key to interpret Merlin's words most of the time.
Yeah, the only advantage of Merlin signaling to you who's the good guys and who the bad guys is, you can know faster who the bad guys are, and then you can get out in front of it. And you can what that allows you to do is it allows Percival to be more vocal in terms of saying what we should be doing. And sometimes that can hasten the game. Sometimes you can get win-win-win the good guys win the very first 3 rounds, the game is over. That gives the bad guys less time to put together that information to try and get that coin flip to figure out who Merlin is.
Yeah, so then you now are going to transition into Percival wants to impersonate Merlin, right?
Correct.
The question is, can you overdo it? Yes, you can.
Sure.
But a lot of times when those bad guys are looking and saying, where did all this good information have? Like, TREY was right early on. TREY was really right. Now, was that because TREY was Merlin, or that was because TREY was Percival? You can be pretty safe as Percival communicating truthful information about the bad guys. Just, again, we're going to get into an iocane moment of like, was this Merlin? Was this Percival? Was it too obvious?
Sure.
That's the kind of discussion the bad guys are going to have. But you should be communicating a lot of information to the basic blues who need that information.
And listen, if you get the information right off the bat and know exactly who the bad guys are, if you start shouting from round 1 who the bad guys are, you don't look like Merlin at all. You look like Percival. But being outed as Percival isn't always the worst thing in the world, because it gives the bad guys very little information to go on as to who Merlin is. It's like, well, Merlin is not him, but it could be any one of the others.
But then there's the discussion is, okay, Tom knew from round 1 who the bad guys were. So what happened there? Who could have communicated that to Tom? I mean, those are the conversations Bad has to have, but that's kind of desperate times trying to figure out like, oh, we have to go back to round 1 to figure out when.
It becomes very, very difficult, and literally anyone could have communicated that. So let's move on to the last one, Mordred. Mordred is very simple. Your job is to be the snake in the grass. You would love, ideally, in a Mordred game, to be the last one outed. You want to see your other fellow bad guys being on teams and failing missions. You yourself do not want to be failing anything. If you end up on a team with a team member, you are not going to fail that mission. They are the ones who are going to fail that mission. They're going to do it for you, okay? You want to avoid the Lady of the Lake because that's how you will get outed 100%. The problem is, how do you avoid Lady of the Lake? Really, you avoid Lady of the Lake by not being on missions. That's really the main way. Most of the times, the Lady of the Lake is going to be given to somebody that was on a failed mission to try and figure out good or bad, plus or minus, along those lines.
So if you were a Mordred,
yes,
what are you doing during the point in which bad guys are looking at each other? Okay, during the point we're doing secret identity, what should Mordred do?
During the secret identity, which actually we should do a little run through of that for a minute so people can use it or at least hear how we do it. It's just a really good simple thing. The bad guys are going to open their eyes. All 3 of them are going to have their thumbs up. You are going to wave if you don't have creaky joints. You're gonna make a firm declaration to them. You're gonna mouth the word Mordred. You're gonna do whatever you need to do so they know you're the special one. Right? It's super important that the bad guys know exactly who it is that they're protecting, because they're going to take a bullet for you. The times you want to be on the team is when it's only good guys on that team. Good guys on the team is death to the spies, to the traitors. So you want to make sure that you get on that team. Since Merlin and Percival don't know anything about you, you've got a greater chance of getting on those teams. Realize that, if at all possible, you'd rather have your compatriots getting on these teams. I think that's pretty much it about Mordred.
Sure.
So let's move on.
We have another mechanism in the game, which is the Lady of the Lake, and I just want to touch on it real quick. Basically, like, the Lady of the Lake allows you to see the true role of a person that you pick, and usually the person to the left, to the right of the start player gets the Lady of the Lake.
Right.
And so in our meta, and this is more or less changing or whatever, what we do is we don't put the person who has the Lady of the Lake in the first round onto the team, just because that person now has a lot of power, more power than like we generally find comfortable. And this gets reduced a bit the greater number of people you have, but like when we play 7, this is probably where I'm personally am unlikely to put someone with Lady of the Lake on the team. Or
at least all things being equal.
Exactly. And so with Lady of the Lake, when you have the Lady of the Lake, you're trying to determine, who should I try to find? Am I looking for a good guy or I'm looking for a bad guy? And it really depends on the situation. I think ultimately both are good to know if you're playing Basic Blue. If you're playing bad, there's a system of thought where you want to keep Lady of the Lake with another bad guy. So you want to give it to a bad guy because what that will do is it will...
You're denying a tool.
Exactly. That's exactly what you are denying a tool to the blue.
Do you give it to Mordred or do you give it to the other known?
I've actually I in the last several games, what I've done, I've been bad and I've had Lady of the Lake, and what I've done is I've started throwing Mordred under the bus with Lady of the Lake. I'm saying he is a bad guy or she is a bad guy, and the reason why I do that is because what that has done in our meta is caused Merlin to decide, bad guys protect Mordred. Why would this bad guy burn Mordred? He wouldn't. This person, it builds trust for the person that I'm giving Lady of the Lake to.
That's advanced play. Let's be clear about that.
Yep. But I will say this thing: if you are Mordred and you ever get Lady of the Lake, you have to look at someone's card. You should never lie.
Correct.
Ever lie, because the moment you do, you signal to Merlin you are the hidden. You are the hidden person. That's the one thing that is a newbie mistake is to you're Mordred, you're hidden, you're everyone's all set up to get your final stab, and you say,
which means, to be clear, what you're saying is, as Mordred, ideal play is to out one of your fellow bad guys, because it would be better most of the time to give it to a fellow bad guy and to say this guy
absolutely,
is bad.
Absolutely. Or in the last round, where the last time you can use Lady of the Lake, you can give it to someone, say they're good,
right? Because they're not going to be able to pass it on.
Exactly.
Yeah, these are not hard rules, but these are the things you should be considering.
Exactly,
and especially like when you're on the outside of that, you're kind of like, why did Paul just pass that?
Yeah, generally best practices. All right. Anything else we want to say? Let's look through the last few things we have to say. Trey, when you pick a team, who's the one person you always put on the team?
You always include yourself in picking a team. I don't think I've found a very good reason, maybe in round 5, maybe in a 10-person game.
Nope.
But even then, it is one of those tells that I have never seen broken is if a player suggests a team that does not include themselves, they're a spy. There's no good reason not to include yourself on the team.
The idea being that if you're a good guy, you only know for sure one thing: I am a good guy. Everything else is suspect. If you are a bad guy, you better be playing as though I am a good guy, and the only thing I know is that I am good, and everything else is suspect. So to not put yourself on the team is ruinous.
The second thing is, as you were kind of talking about earlier in terms of like buying loyalty, one of the things that happens a lot of times, if you're a bad guy and you're picking a team, you're very likely to pick 2 good people to be on the team with you because you don't want to put on a second bad guy. So when trying to determine who should I include in my team, like we're really getting down to it here, I've got to make some guesses about who's good with me. When in doubt, it's a better bet to pick people who have been picked by other people than the people that were doing the picking.
Correct.
Just because bad guys typically will be picking good guys to go on their teams with them. So
absolutely.
So push it a little bit towards who got picked when trying to pick more blue players for yourself.
Well, listen, we're running a little long here, so let us... I think this is a pretty good stopping point. Does everybody agree that we can,
sure.
we can kind of cut it here? Let's just say this. We are some pretty hardcore gamers, and we are talking for an hour and 45 minutes about a silly little social deduction party game that we have played 300 times. If this does not tell you that this is a game that is worth your time, I don't know what else we can say. It is a phenomenal game. The highs of the play experience of this game are so high. Of being
and the lows.
So low. The lows are so... But
they
like as Matt said, Matt will be infuriated. His face will turn red when somebody has accused him of being a bad guy when he's not a bad guy. And 3 minutes later, he's done. It's like an endorphin rush. It's just coursing through his body, and then boom, it's a release. It is an absolutely amazing experience. Some of our most fun, the most laughter we have had ever have been around this one game.
And I would like to add, this game really rewards several plays, and you learn you get better so quick at this game. Like I will say, like, you know, TREY, not to throw you under the bus, but you were not very good at this game at the very start, and now I really consider you the most dangerous person at the table, and it's quick.
Thanks.
It's quick.
I consider myself the most dangerous person to myself.
So anyway, but like it really rewards.
I'm voting no.
It really rewards multiple plays. Just give it a little time, and I guarantee you,
it gets better.
You're gonna love this.
You'll
game.
appreciate it. It's elegant. The more you play it, the more you'll love it.
Well,
except for your Matt.
I'm beaming ear to ear just because I just love you guys, and I'm just I just feel like you guys are really living up to the Game Brain title right now. The fact that you could all talk for an hour and a half about a $15 game that could be explained in 30 seconds. I have chosen my friends correctly, and this is the level of Game Brain that we all have, and I hope that was interesting to everybody. I actually was listening to everything you said and am more excited to play it than I have been in a long time. And look, good. I do not dislike Avalon.
Sure.
I'm very clear about the areas that I do think that the first 20 minutes of the game I often check out. Maybe that's a me problem. Maybe that's just I just don't enjoy like you said. What I think you said was really elucidating to me was that the amount of effort you have to put in is very high, and the amount of information you get is very low. And I often find that to be unfun.
And it's totally valid.
Yeah.
It is the hardest work of the game, and listen, you can win the game without doing that hard work.
Sure,
but you know, it's a game of inches, and so we as a group like to put in that work and see if we can eke out a little extra advantage, a little extra information in those early stages.
I do have one question for you guys that I'd love an answer on, in terms of people who play this game, because I think this game is tough for groups that are not very comfortable with each other. A group of strangers might have a hard time with this game, but also I think shy players and people with social anxiety and things like that really struggle with games like this.
I will say I have friends that come to my game night, and I purposely make sure that we don't play Avalon when we play with them. And it's not because they're shy, actually. It's because they're fundamentally decent people.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I have 2 or 3 friends that live their lives without lying, and they find it very difficult to lie.
Yeah, so
it's amazing to me.
Do you think there is a moral space in this game?
Look, when we play games, we play to model conflict, right? It's no different than lion cubs that are fighting with each other. They're playing games. What they're doing is they're modeling conflict in a way that is safe and that that holds a space where they can practice this sort of stuff before it becomes life or death. I think games have that. We're able to have conflict. We're able to compete with each other without it being a life or death. And in this case, we get to lie to each other.
But do you think becoming a better liar is immoral?
Do I think? Well, look, I will go back to the very first thing I said. This game is about building trust. No, it really is. It really is. This game is about there are liars in the world. There are people that wish you harm. Together, collectively, we are stronger than that. And when the good guys win, it is because of that. So I know what this game is some people are playing that game, but more people in every single version of this game, more people are the people that are trying to combat that are trying to stop the gaslighting, that are trying to see the truth through the lies, that are trying to get rid of the fake news. To me, this is a very positive game in that sense.
It does teach you how to lie, though.
Yeah, it does. But it also teaches you how to spot liars really well, too, which is...
more I play, the more I have... respect for how little I know as far as spotting liars. I would say I would feel better going into an interrogation with police after having played this game.
Sure.
Even completely innocent.
Yeah.
No, I'm more comfortable saying I don't know.
Yeah.
Look, than creating, like, people oftentimes start telling stories that they can't actually back up.
Sure.
Like, if you don't know something, say I don't know.
Yeah. It may not be that you can spot liars better, but I will say this. It makes you less likely to be gaslit, because it makes you value facts and information. What is indisputable? What is 100%?
You learn to not trust your instincts and your hunches so strongly
like you
unless
can't
they're
back
based
up
on
what
something.
you're saying. Like, you've made a number of leaps there that you cannot back up.
It enforces critical thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. Yeah, that's correct. Well, that was fascinating, guys. I really appreciated that.